Welcome Theatre Addicts, my name is Fern and I'm here at the review stage to review Forget Me Not, The Alzheimer's Whodunit by Rob G as part of the Vancouver 2018 Fringe Festival. So I'm really excited for this one because my grandmother actually suffers from both dementia and Alzheimer's. She's in her mid-90s, but I think with illnesses such as this and tragedy, it's so important to find the humor in these situations, otherwise they completely dehumanize us. Rob G is actually from the UK, and I read on his website that the NHS is currently using this show of his to train nurses about ethics and about reporting concerns in these kinds of cases. So I think that's really interesting. So I'm sure he's worked as a psychiatric nurse around many different countries for many years, so that I think his point of view is going to be really insightful, and I think the show is going to be very touching and hopefully a bit funny. My grandmother herself loves old mysteries and whodunits, so I think that aspect of the show was a really interesting choice, and I'm really looking forward to it. My initial reactions are that I just loved it. It was a really touching show, and I felt a lot of real emotions at the end. It was really lovely. So the venue itself is actually really nice. It's probably one of my favorites so far. It's a very intimate little setting. You're all sort of sitting semi-circular and very comfortable and plush. So it was a great setting for his show. So the show itself, I can see why it has been used by the NHS for training, which he actually mentions at the end of the show. It touches upon these things that are so prevalent in nursing homes and in any kind of care where the dementia and Alzheimer's patients are. First of all, shortage of staff, which means that all the other staff members are completely burnt out, and which means that they treat the patients as non-human, because he even talked about this train of just washing them, bathing them, and then taking them to the toilet, cleaning up their messes, and then it starts all over again. So I think that those messages, even just the languages that his different characters used, the way they dehumanize the patients. You know, there was one mention of granny farming. The owner of the manager of this place was talking about the granny farming, and just that language of speaking about these human beings is so dehumanizing. It's really, and unfortunately it's just so true. But again, it wasn't just the patient, it wasn't just the staff that were doing this. He did reflect and show in his show that the systems in place are also neglecting as in from the systems in place in the NHS, that they don't do enough to care of their staff and of their nurses especially. And I think there was some subtle commentaries, not so subtle, but maybe more subtle if you don't know about the NHS system in the UK and what's happening right now. Some very scary things are happening in the NHS right now with staff shortages and less pay for doctors and less pay for nurses. So I think that was commented on in the show, which is just so sad. But I think those problems that he's commenting on transcend to other countries. I'm pretty sure that those kinds of problems are very prevalent in Canadian nursing homes and in hospitals, which is sad. So it's not something that is specific to the UK. So that's very unfortunate. He said something at the end of the show that really showed that lack of care, and it was something about without giving away any spoilers, one of the Alzheimer's patients had died and nobody cares. It's like just another old person, just another Alzheimer's patient, so nobody really cared. But as soon as somebody that doesn't have Alzheimer's dies, then suddenly people care. And the way he delivered that moment at the end was heartbreaking. I really felt my heart surge at that moment because it's just so true, and he delivered it with a lot of depth and a lot of heart. So that part was very sad. He used the lighting and the music quite well to show kind of the introduction of the different characters, or not so much just the characters as well, but the settings. So one was like the older people, another were the nurses that were working there. But then at the same time, his characters were so developed, he didn't even need the lighting and the music to show, the different. It was very well done. He's very in character all the time, which is perfect. I'd have to say the one thing I did sort of struggle with was after the initial development of the whodunit, the mystery, it was sort of sidetracked to introduce the other characters. And I found that there were times when I was losing track a little bit of all these new characters, I don't know if it was his accent or, I've lived in the UK long enough to not have the British, as many accents as there are, flummox me or the slang, but I found that maybe it was a bit too rushed or a bit looked over, and I found that I missed out on a lot of the characters. So when it actually came down to the end of who killed this person, I found that I thought there was only one or two options. I lost track a bit of the earlier characters. So that was the only thing for me that sort of was glossed over, and I found myself a bit distracted. But I think maybe other people followed it better than I did. But I'd say that was probably the only thing, that I disliked about the show, was it didn't really establish the other characters well enough, because you got a bit lost of them. Oh, you lost track of them. I'd have to say one of my favorite parts, which I think probably was everyone's, one of the characters spoke in cliches the whole time, but every cliche was perfectly mixed with another cliche that sort of was also a similar meaning. But this performance of this character was flawless. Every single line, he was churning out these mixed cliches, these swapped cliches. Ooh, hello. And it was perfect. You joke about actors supposed to be knowing their lines, but I mean, we're so used to saying these sayings. How does he not just automatically say those words? That takes some practice. It was perfect. And you think, every time you see this character, you think it's gonna get old and you're not gonna laugh at these mixed up cliches, and honestly, every time you do, it was so clever. I love that part. So that was probably my favorite. But then again, the whole message of just how we treat Alzheimer's patients and what needs to change was very meaningful. So I think this show is perfect for anyone to go see. I don't think maybe kids won't enjoy it. It's nothing too serious that they can't come one or two parts. There was a bit of language, but the show is for everyone. I think especially if you have someone in your family who's a nurse or who has an illness like this, it's definitely go watch this one. I really enjoyed it, but you don't have to have any connection to the disease to enjoy this one. I loved it, and I came out feeling very touched by it. So that was my review of Forget Me Not, The Alzheimer's Whodunit by Rob G, here at the review stage. Please leave a comment below if you've seen the show and if you felt touched by it. Please go follow the YouTube channel for Theatre Addicts, and happy fringing!